Your husband is dead. Pack your bags and never come back. My gold digger Dill said it standing over my husband's coffin. I nodded, then signed the paper that made her and my useless son tenants in my house. I stood before the dark polished wood of my husband's coffin, my fingers trembling as the grief and shock waged war inside me. The church smelled of lilies and stale sorrow. People whispered condolences. A priest murmured prayers. But all I heard was the clack of my own heart breaking under the weight of his absence and the terrible words that followed. Ella stepped forward like a vulture. Arms crossed, lips curled into a sneer. Her voice rang out cold and sharp. Well, well. The old man's finally gone. And you? You're next. You're dead weight, Mother. A parasite we've tolerated for too long. Time slowed. My breath caught. The words landed like blows to my chest. Ricky, my only son, joined in, his voice tinged with impatience and disdain. Dad should have put you in a home years ago. You're just a relic with high blood pressure and hallucinations. They watched me, smug and cruel, as though waiting for an admission that I belonged behind bars or at the bottom of a grave beside my husband. Ella glided closer, her voice a clinical whisper. We'll say you've lost it. Dementia. And the house? Already taken care of thanks to Dad's revised will. I froze. My husband had always promised me that he would never sign anything without discussing it with me. He loved me. We had built this home together. I had raised their son here. Now, with those 4 words, they casually erased my years of devotion and loyalty. Before I could gather myself, Ella's hand came crashing down on the handle of my suitcase. She flung it toward me like a piece of garbage. The metal clicks and rattling broke my heart as the suitcase tumbled to the carpet. Ella glared. Your husband is dead. Pack your dusty dresses and your old people meds. This house is mine now. I stood there, tears welling, the hushed gasps from mourners swelling around me. A priest cleared his throat at the altar. A mourner shifted in her pew. The air thickened with pain and disbelief. My heart pounded in my ears. I felt blood pounding beneath my skin. I tried to swallow, but my throat had turned to stone. Rage and sorrow tangled inside me. Had this been their plan all along? To use my son's death as a vehicle for their cruelty? To isolate me, discard me, strip me of a home and a husband, all while they offered condolences in front of the coffin? I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening on the polished wood of the casket. I had raised Ricky by hand, held him when he cried, taught him right from wrong. I had shared a lifetime with his father, yet here they stood, ready to cast me aside the moment he was gone. The priest's words blurred. I looked around the room. My grandchildren stared at me wide-eyed. Family friends avoided my gaze. Even the organ music seemed muted, as though the building itself recoiled. My mind traveled 1,000 miles away, to happier times. The first day I brought Ricky home, his father's proud smile. Sunday dinners around this same living room table. Christmas mornings full of joy. Now, all of that seemed like a fragile memory behind a grim facade. I took a slow, steadying breath. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My tears slipped back behind my lashes. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I nodded once, just once, a single, quiet gesture. Then I turned away from the coffin, from their cold faces, from the world that had just exiled me from the life I had built. The click of my heels on the marble floor sounded deafening in the silence that followed. I walked slowly, deliberately, through the roomful of shocked mourners. Some turned to whisper behind their fans or to offer a pitying glance. I felt each one of those glances like a brand. But I held my head high. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not ask for mercy or forgiveness or anything from them. At the church doors, I paused and looked back at my home, at the coffin, at Ella and Ricky standing guard. I knew then that I had died here, died to their expectations, died to their cruelty. But as I exhaled, I felt something else rising inside of me, a defiant spark, a fierce determination that said I would not vanish quietly. I stepped out into the family sedan, my own, parked by the curb. The driver opened the door in silence. I closed it behind me and placed my hand on the cool window glass, watching the funeral procession file out in black suits and mourning shawls. My husband was gone. Their mercy had evaporated with him. I was alone but not defeated. Inside me a voice whispered, I will be seen. I will not be erased. They will hear from me, not here, not now, but somewhere down the road. The church bells tolled, a hollow echo in the street. The engine hummed. I exhaled again, the breath of someone reborn by betrayal and pain. And as we drove away, I did not look back. I was done being the woman they cast aside. My life was shattered, but I was not broken. I pulled the suitcase onto my lap and closed my eyes. Grief, yes. Fear, yes. But also hope and fire. Today I stood before my husband's coffin and received death from my own son and daughter-in-law. But tomorrow, I would build a life that would make them sorry they ever underestimated me. This is where the story begins. I reached out quietly to my late husband's old lawyer, Mr. Dawson, the man Ella had dismissed years ago for refusing to bend to her whims. His office was tucked away in an older part of town, a discreet suite guarded by wooden bookcases and the scent of oaken shelves. I arrived with only a hardcover Bible and my trembling resolve, unwilling to mention any accusations until I was certain they held truth. Dawson greeted me with a careful but warm smile. He hadn't changed much, same salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, soft but steady voice. He led me into his sprawling study where diplomas and family portraits lined the walls. I knew you'd come, he said, voice kind but knowing, as though understanding exactly what I carried in my heart. I forced a nod. Dawson ushered me to a chair and asked gently, "Do you want me to examine the will?" I laid the documents before him. The envelope Ella had handed me 3 days ago, claiming it contained a Safe-Light updated will. It was thin, hastily signed, no official seals, unsigned witnesses, nothing like the original wills I'd seen during my husband's earlier estate changes. Dawson took the papers, thumb to the signature. He set them aside and opened his drawer. Moments later, he handed me an official copy of the last legal will, sun-faded, marked with the firm's stamp, bearing my husband's signature. He leaned back. The room grew quiet. "This new one," he said, carefully pointing to the newer document, "bears a forged signature. Not yours, Mrs. Walker." He tapped his temple gently. "Your husband always insisted on discussing matters with both of you. Ella never managed to persuade him otherwise." I felt my scalp prickle. The house was already transferred to Ricky's name. I'd seen the deed alone one afternoon after Ella had pointedly excluded me. Dawson continued, "They wanted this in place the moment your husband died." And it was. I managed to whisper, "They lied to me." He nodded. "And more. Look at this." He opened his laptop and directed my attention to an email chain. The sender, Ella Doc W. The recipient, a psychiatric care center in another state. Subject line, "Prepare a long-stay room." The message, short and chilling, read, "She's becoming dangerous. Keep her beyond observation only if necessary. Thank you." My heart clenched. I recognized the psych ward address. Ella had begun plans before my husband even cooled in his coffin. "And this is only the start," Dawson said. I overheard, when I was leaving, the staff were conducting pre-admissions. She'd provided false statements that you're suffering from dementia, confusion, hallucinations. They've written up forms, signed sheets, it's all here. I folded, seeing them so blatantly erase me with paper and ease, winding their plan of institutionalization. My hands shook, my breath hitched, not for what they had done, but for what they assumed I would accept, that I would fall in line and disappear behind their legal curtain, like a ghost flitting through a world that no longer believed in me. I swallowed hard. "They think I'll go quietly," I said, voice small but rising. "They think a judge will sign a committal order because they call themselves family." Dawson closed the laptop. "They've got the deed. They've got authority. If they present these forms, a judge may sign if I don't act." I tasted bile. What can I do? He leaned across the desk. "We fight back. We file an injunction against that will. We contest the deed. We challenge their psychiatric claims. We can bring a court evaluation of your competency." "But they'll say I'm unstable," I whispered, voice trembling. "How do I show I'm not?" Dawson watched me. He slid an envelope across to me. Inside was a legal authorization form. "We'll need your permission to subpoena emails, records, medical files." He hesitated, eyes steady. "And we'll need recordings if there's evidence of them plotting, confirming dementia, that you were coerced or that signatures were forged." I closed my hand over the envelope. Do you have proof? He asked gently. Yes, I managed. I have a camera I installed in the living room to keep an eye on Molly, our old cat, but it might have captured them. At that moment, relief and fear collided inside me. I'd forgotten that camera completely until now. In my grief, I'd let technology slip from memory, but now it stood between me and them. There's more, I said, voice steadying. Ella told me they planned to tuck me away. They laughed about me in the halls of my home. Dawson nodded. That will be critical. We can file all this. Emergency restraining order, stop the transfer of property, invalidate that will. I swallowed, nodding. No more hiding, no more silence. He stood and extended his arm. They made one mistake. They underestimated you. I gripped his arm, suddenly resolute. I could already feel the gears of their plan grinding. They believed I would break. They planned to drown me in paper, to cage me in a facility, to erase my name from my own home. They didn't count on one thing. I was done living on their terms. Dawson smiled, quietly proud. The court will need hard evidence. We'll need that video. The email, your testimony. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning. I exhaled. This was no longer about revenge. It was about survival, about claiming back my reality, my dignity, my home. They thought I'd be easy. They were about to meet a storm. I left his office clutching the evidence, mind racing. My phone buzzed with condolences and funeral messages, but I would answer none of them. Not yet. No one needed to know about the papers, the plots, the plan. The only person who needed to know was me. I was not done. Their trap had been set, but I was already stepping out of it. I remembered the small motion-activated camera perched atop the bookcase, its lens aimed at Molly's favorite sunlit nook. I had installed it months ago, not for any sinister reason, but simply to check on my aging Tabby when I was in the kitchen. In the grief-clouded days after my husband's funeral, I nearly forgot it until Mr. Dawson reminded me. Once home, I retrieved the little SD card, tucked beneath the device, and carried it to my study, placing it gently on the desk, as if it were a fragile heirloom. Gingerly, I slid the card into the reader. My heart pounded as I opened the files on my laptop. I wasn't sure what I hoped to see. Maybe evidence of their plan in writing, maybe proof of defamation, but part of me trembled at the thought of confirming the worst. I clicked the earliest clip. The screen pixelated slightly, then cleared to show the hallway outside the living room, and there they were, Ella and Ricky. They stood side by side, shoulders rigid with purpose. The video was silent, so I played the audio. My breath caught as I heard Ella's clipped, rehearsed whisper. Act shocked, okay? You look at me like you're stunned, she coached, voice low but smug. Then you say, Mom's hallucinating again. That triggers it. You pause, like you're worried, then mention calling the police, something like, I'll call the police if she doesn't stop. And doctor, we need a doctor. Ricky nodded decisively. He crouched, adjusting something on the couch. Right. Then, I walk in, act like I'm concerned, then hand you something, maybe a phone, with documentation. It looks natural. Bruises, confusion, done deal. He straightened, arms crossed. His tone was chillingly practiced, absent of remorse. The clip froze on Ella's gloved hand, raised theatrically to her mouth as though suppressing laughter. This wasn't a slip of momentary frustration. It was carefully scripted cruelty. I swallowed hard. They had turned my home into a stage for their plot. I clicked to another clip. This one started with Ella speaking into her phone, her tone brisk, businesslike. Yes, Dr. Martin? This is Ella Reynolds. I'm calling about my mother-in-law. She's been showing signs of confusion, hallucinations. She keeps asking about her dead husband, but then becomes agitated and aggressive. She paused, listening. Yes, I can drop her off tomorrow. I just want everything ready. Medical evaluation, documentation, long-term admission. Thank you. My hands shook. They had prepared an entire psychiatric dossier without my knowledge. They were playing the health card, scripting me into mental illness so the law would side with them rather than me. Another clip followed, a whispered conversation in late-night shadows. Ricky, voice tight with scheming, said, Once she's in, it's legal. We're free to do whatever with the house. She won't be able to contest the will. It's perfect. Ella's laugh, soft and cruel, Perfect. The video ended with their silhouettes melting out of frame, walking away from the living room, leaving the camera empty once more. My vision blurred. I breathed out shallowly, tears collecting at my lashes but not falling. Rage rose in me, not the hot kind that lashes out blindly, but a cold, focused fire. They had weaponized the system against me, falsifying documents, rehearsing lies, manipulating doctors. This was not just theft. This was character assassination, a slow poisoning of my identity. I paused the footage. I stared at their motionless forms frozen in betrayal. I realized then that the battle would not be won with tears or pleas. It would be won with each piece of evidence, with unwavering resolve. I was not a relic in their story. I was a woman with a name, a lawful resident and a legal right to my home and sanity. I fetched my phone and recorded a memo to myself. Evidence found. They orchestrated false mental health accusations to transfer assets. Must present to lawyer and press. No more silence. I closed the laptop and stood, the weight of the evidence pressed against my chest like an anchor, and yet, strangely, it felt liberating. The camera had captured their plans so clearly that no courtroom or news story could deny it. They had tried to record me as sick. Now I had recorded them as criminals. Late into the night, I rewatched the clips. Each time, the same resolve crystallized deeper in me. Beneath the pain and betrayal, I found a strong pulse of clarity. I would not be hidden. They would pay for this disgrace, and I would claim my home, name, and dignity back. The camera's footage was now my shield. Their stage show was caught red-handed. I sat silently until dawn, absorbing the knowledge that I had not just survived their plan, I had uncovered it. At sunrise, I sent a brief text to Mr. Dawson. "We have the video, complete. Let's begin." Within minutes, I felt the shift, from prey to architect of my own defense. And for the first time since the funeral, I slept peacefully. Not because I was safe yet, but because for the first time I was ready. I began the early morning with a quiet purpose I had not felt since before the funeral. The house was still, devoid of laughter, devoid of sympathy, just the echoes of betrayal and a glaring absence where my husband once stood. I gathered the materials I had spent days collecting, each one a brick in the foundation of my defense. First, the original will, locked in my safe, hidden from Ella's watchful eyes. It now lay open on my desk. I thumbed through its pristine pages, inked words of true intent, naming me as full owner of this house and its contents. Then, next to it, the forged version they had slipped into probate. Old handwriting, shaky signatures, intentionally altered clauses transferring everything to Ricky. The contrast was visceral, almost painful. Beside the wills, the SD card lay like a time bomb. I slid it into my laptop and opened the video files anew, the footage of Ella and Ricky coaching each other, planning the charade, plotting a mental health takeover. They were there in cold, pixelated clarity. Ella's voice, Ricky's expression, they looked so harmless in the footage, but their words cut like a saw. Acts shocked, hallucinations, long stay room. I grabbed printed screenshots. Ella's face mid-rehearsal, Ricky in mid-whisper. I stamped them with dates and times pulled from metadata. Each image a silent witness. Next, the email threads. I copied them, printed headers and bodies, dated messages from Ella to Dr. Martin's office, prepare long stay room, dangerous behavior, hallucinations, all evidence of their medical manipulation. The voicemail recordings came next. They contained Ricky's self-satisfied voice, bragging about arranging my removal and the revised will. I clipped out those portions, added transcripts below the audio files printed to paper. I stacked them all into labeled folders. Will, forced originals, will, forced originals, forced original, forced. Camera footage, emails, voicemail transcripts. Next, I pulled up the contact sheet for my husband's longtime lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, the same one ousted by Ella months ago. I dialed his office, my heart steady. "Mr. Caldwell, it's Claire Hudson." I introduced myself firmly. "I need your help. I have evidence of will forgery, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and false psychiatric commitments. I need legal counsel, and I need you to draft a complaint for the court." He responded with quiet astonishment. "Claire, if what you say is true, this is significant. I'll meet you today. Bring everything." I exhaled. The first step was taken. Over the next hours, I met Mr. Caldwell at his law office. I placed the binders before him. He leafed through pages, nodding slowly. "This video," he said, adjusting his glasses. "This is damning. They planned your institutionalization." He focused next on the forged will side by side with the original, felony forgery, probate fraud, and then emails and voicemails confirm intent. This is multi-layered conspiracy. In that moment, I felt the shift. The same house that had felt foreign was my fortress. The evidence, legal documents, criminal intent, emotional cruelty, powered me. Caldwell looked at me and said, "We should file an injunction, freeze the estate, demand independent psychiatric evaluation. Only when they've no legal maneuver left do we confront them, publicly and in court." I nodded. He set to work drafting the filings. An emergency petition to probate court declaring the will invalid, a restraining order to keep Ricky and Ella from handling my finances or changing my living situation, and a complaint to law enforcement for elder exploitation. That afternoon, I made a single symbolic gesture. I removed Ella's false will from the probate folder at the courthouse, placing my own original in its place under Caldwell's supervision. My hands shook, not from fear but from determination. I left the courthouse under a clouded sky, but inside me, a growing clarity. No longer the victim waiting for permission to fight back. I was the one pulling the strings now. I would not lash out with rage or expose them with drama. My weapons were truth and law. I would strangle their plan with facts, evidence, and contracts. I returned home and stood in what had been my living room, but had become their stage. I took down old family photos, my wedding smile leaning next to my husband's, and replaced them with the battered folder of evidence visible on the coffee table. It was a message: I was watching. I was prepared. They would not rewrite my life without resistance. That evening I brewed chamomile tea and sat quietly under the lamp's warm glow. The house was calm, but different. It had new purpose. Each document, each digital trace was a promise. They would not steal my home, my sanity, or my dignity without being met, legally, firmly, wisely. I stared at the night window and whispered to myself, I will not return to the shadows. Not today, not ever again. I reached out to Julie Bain, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter known for her fearless exposés of elder abuse. I didn't sugarcoat the situation. I messaged her. "Dear Ms. Bain, I am Claire Hudson, a 78-year-old widow. My daughter and son conspired to forge my late husband's will, fabricate claims of dementia, and plan to commit me to a psychiatric facility in order to seize my home. I have incontrovertible evidence: video, email correspondence, recordings, original and forged wills. If this story matters to you, I need it told." 3 days later, Julie called. Her tone was serious, respectful. She understood the gravity. We met at her office in downtown Austin. I handed over thumb drives, printed copies, metadata logs, everything meticulously labeled. Julie took it all in, nodding. "This isn't just theft," she said quietly. "It's a pattern of exploitation. This is elder abuse at its worst." She assured me the story would run, and run prominently. When the headline appeared on the New York Times website the next morning, I was sitting alone in my living room. The headline glowed on my laptop: "When Family Betrays, Texas Grandma Fights Back." The subheader read, "Elder Abuse, Legal Forgery, Conspiracy. Marie Hudson took a stand against her own daughter and son." I felt my breath catch. Julie's article laid out everything. It quoted laws protecting the elderly. It included metadata proof, the camera timestamp, email headers, document comparisons of the wills. It referenced the psychiatric correspondence, intent on invalidating my competence. It even included clips of voicemail, Ricky's cold declaration, "She's going away, long stay." As people scrolled through the digital pages, hundreds of thousands reacted, commented, and shared. Soon, "Not Crazy Old Lady" began trending nationwide. Tweets poured in. "Bless her. This is what real courage looks like. Fight like a grandma. My heart breaks that she had to go through this, but good for her for standing up." I gave my mom permission to install a camera after reading this "Not Crazy Old Lady." News outlets picked up the story. ABC, CBS, even CNN featured segments. Julie appeared on CBS This Morning, softly stating, "This is about dignity, autonomy, and justice for elders." The flood of attention ricocheted through Austin's social circles. Friends who had once admired Ella began questioning how a loving family could descend into calculated abuse. Ricky's colleagues received calls. At his office, whispers circulated. "Did you see the NYT piece? He forged his own mother's will." The air turned cold for them. Ella found herself fielding uncomfortable messages from her charity board. Her image, once cultivated as compassionate and family-oriented, crumbled. A few close friends called, expressing confusion and shame. One offered support. Another said quietly, "I'm sorry this happened. Please let me know how to help." At home, the tension was palpable. They no longer dared speak openly. I, however, remained calm. I hosted a quiet afternoon tea with neighbors and a few friends, just us, seated around my kitchen table. Newspapers, both printed and digital, lay strewn across the linen. We sipped chamomile tea. We talked about healing, about boundaries, about justice. I told them gently, "This isn't about punishment. It's about protecting the next grandma." The online movement grew. I appeared on a small local talk show. I said, "They wanted to label me crazy so they could steal my rights, memories, my entire home. But I refused. I chose truth." The host nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. Messages arrived from strangers. Invitations to speak at senior centers. Legal aid groups thanked me for highlighting systemic vulnerability. Meanwhile, social media pressure mounted. Protesters gathered outside Ricky and Ella's workplace. Just a few signs, respectful but firm. "Family, not theft." The hashtag #FightLikeAGrandma held steady. Advocacy groups cited my case when urging legislative bodies to strengthen laws against elder exploitation. In private, I felt steady. The storm outside reaffirmed that silence isn't protection, exposure is. I read each heartfelt message carefully. I replied to many, saying, "Thank you for hearing me." I did not gloat when they tried to contact me. Instead, I focused on the future, for me and for others like me. As dusk fell over my porch, I sat nursing a cup of tea. The glow of the screen reflected headlines and messages, but in my heart there was quiet contentment. I had broken the silence. I had reclaimed my home. And I had opened the door for others, and in that moment, I understood. Victory is sweetest when shared. ChatGPT Denoy. I filed the formal complaint with the FBI and the Texas Attorney General's office the morning after the New York Times article ran. Inside that envelope was everything: original wills, video files, email logs, audio recordings, and sworn statements. I even included a copy of the published article to show how public awareness had already begun to shine a light on this case. Within days, the investigation began. An FBI agent called me personally. She spoke with kindness, but her tone held gravity. "Mrs. Hudson, we take elder abuse very seriously. We will review all evidence and contact you with next steps." By the end of the week, federal legal teams and state prosecutors were combing through the materials. The wheels of justice turned quickly. Investigators confirmed. The revised will, supposedly signed by my husband 6 months before he died, had a forgery expert's mark. The handwriting did not match known signatures. The email to the psychiatric facility requesting a long-stay room with details about my mental decline had been sent from an email server traced directly to the house's Wi-Fi network. Metadata from that email matched the same IP addresses on Ricky's devices. The video from my hidden camera showed Ella instructing Ricky to act surprised, say she's hallucinating. Statements were corroborated by witnesses who had overheard fragments of the plot. Documents showed that shortly after my husband's funeral, Ella had changed his life insurance beneficiary from me to herself and Ricky, raising red flags that financial gain had motivated the forgery and plan. 7 federal charges were quickly filed: elder financial exploitation, forgery, and falsifying a will, conspiracy to commit unlawful confinement, attempted undue influence, fraud against a vulnerable adult, insurance fraud, submission of false documents to an institution. A court hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. Ella and Ricky were both arrested and placed under house arrest, with strict no-contact orders. Bail was denied due to the severity of the charges and the perceived risk of flight or intimidation. Word spread fast. Neighbors watched as a yellow police tape briefly went up around their home. Later, state agents removed dozens of files, Gatto files, printouts, flash drives, all evidence of their scheme. We learned that the psychiatric facility had been called off at the last minute, thanks to a judge's emergency review based on the email evidence. The community reacted with a mixture of shock and relief. Media vans lined the street outside my house again, not to shame me, but to comfort the other side of the story. Headlines read, "Elder abuse charges filed, Texas mother-in-law fights back." Support groups for elderly victims began to reach out, offering resources and inviting me to speak. In private, I felt that surge of validation. The law had sided with truth, the world had held its breath, and justice was answering. Each evening, I sat on my porch with a book and a cup of tea, listening to the distant hum of news vans retracting their cables. Knowing the legal system had acted, and that Ella and Ricky were legally powerless to reach me, made the air feel lighter for the first time since the funeral. I slept peacefully, with a certainty that I had earned through documented evidence and moral clarity, and I realized demolishing their power wasn't enough. Building a life of dignity afterward would be the real victory. I sat in the courtroom gallery, the polished wood panels and fluorescent lights pressing in on me like the weight of every wrong I had carried. Across the aisle, Ricky and Ella sat side by side, her face strained, his stiff with discomfort, as if they believed the courthouse was a stage for their next performance. The prosecutor began by introducing the evidence one by one. First, the grainy footage from my hidden camera, showing Ella coaching Ricky, whispering the words, "Act shocked. Say she's hallucinating again. Call the doctor afterwards." The courtroom fell silent as the video played, Ella's lips barely moving, Ricky's head nodding in agreement. The clip ended with their practiced expressions, empty, cold. During the prosecution's argument, my attorney presented more than just emotional appeal. He anchored our case in law. He cited the Texas Elder Financial Protection Act and key provisions of the Uniform Probate Code, outlining how Ricky and Ella's actions met every threshold of criminal elder abuse, forgery, and unlawful confinement. "This is not merely a case of inheritance gone wrong," he stated firmly to the jury. "This is systemic, coordinated exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Every email, every altered document, every false medical claim meets the statute's definition of felony fraud and coercion." Then came the emails. Official-looking requests sent to a psychiatric center on hospital letterhead. "Prepare long-stay room for an elderly female patient displaying dangerous delusions. Dr. Franklin will assess." The sender's address traced back to their home network. The presiding judge furrowed her brow, noting the audacity. Next, the forged will surfaced on a large screen. The handwriting expert testified that the signature did not match a real one from my late husband. The will's revisions transferred ownership of the house to Ricky alone and included a clause stating, "Mother is mentally incompetent," as justification. The most damning moment arrived when the prosecutor played Ricky's recorded phone call, in which he said, "We just need her out of the way, in a ward so she's easy to manage. The will's ready. Ella'll close on the insurance right after the funeral." That phone clip froze time in that courtroom. I felt my hands freeze in my lap. Ella squeezed Ricky's knee, her lips quivering, not with regret, but fear of what was being revealed to the jury and the public. When the prosecutor invited me to take the stand, I rose slowly. My legs trembled, but my voice did not. "I trusted them," I told the court. "I believed family. I didn't question when they told me that Dad revised the will or when they discussed a care facility. But when the camera showed me they were rehearsing lies, I knew I had to act." I presented the original will, carefully kept in a safety deposit box, and the contract they'd drafted for a fake care facility. I spoke quietly but firmly. "I am not mentally incompetent. I am not a commodity." One by one, witnesses were called. The pastor who had attended my husband's funeral confirmed they had no knowledge of any revised will. The psychiatric doctor confirmed that no appointment, no referral had been made, until Ella tried to backtrack. Even the journalist who had published the exposé testified on how the evidence from the audio, camera, and emails lined up together, proving intent. Then came the turning point. Ricky himself was called in for questioning. The defense counsel pleaded with him, but the prosecutor asked, "Ricky, Did you plan to declare your mother incompetent to control the house and finances? Ricky hesitated. His face reddened. The courtroom leaned in. He swallowed. Yes, he said, voice low. We thought this was the only way. But I didn't think it would look so bad. The judge paused. Read it back, the prosecutor said, and Ricky repeated it. Read the part about conspiracy. The judge nodded. Mr. Ricky Thompson, you are under oath and bound by the truth. Ricky's shake-filled confession sealed what the court already suspected. Cold, premeditated attempt to strip me of my rights and my home. Ella took the stand next. Her voice quavered. I wanted to protect our future, she said. I thought we were helping. The prosecutor pointed to the video. That was coaching, not caring. A technician displayed the footage again, freezing Ella's reflection in the camera's lens. She shut her eyes. A long, heavy pause settled in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. I sat straight-backed the entire time. I remembered the pain, the insults at the funeral, the sharp words that said I was next to die, that I was crazy, that the house was already theirs. I remembered the camera recording the plot. I remembered my own trembling hands, turning my hidden evidence into justice. They returned. The foreman stood, cleared his throat. In the matter of State versus Ella Thompson and Richard Thompson, we find the defendant Richard Thompson guilty on all charges, including elder financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and forgery. We find Ella Thompson guilty on charges of conspiracy and elder abuse. My throat tightened as relief and sorrow washed over me simultaneously. The judge read the sentences. Ricky, 8 years in prison, no parole, full restitution of all legal fees plus compensation for emotional distress. Ella, 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory counseling, and court-ordered restitution for emotional distress. She would also lose any claim to my estate and could not own property in my name. Then came the most satisfying part. The judge looked at me as the final act. Mrs. Thompson, we are restoring title of the property to you. In addition, under court order, the defendants, she pointed to Ricky and Ella, must enter into a lease agreement to reside on the premises at fair market rental rates, directly under Mrs. Thompson's control. Failure to do so will result in eviction. After the sentencing, I met with my attorney to draft the lease agreement. This was not a suggestion, it was a court mandate. Ella and Ricky, stripped of their assets and bound by the terms of their sentence, could not afford to live elsewhere. The lease was their only legal option for housing. It laid out strict terms: fair market rent, monthly payments, no rights of ownership or interference. Ricky flinched as he read the clause. Tenant status under the legal supervision of Claire Hudson. Ella bit her lip but said nothing. They understood then. This was no longer just my home. It was my domain, and the law stood behind me. My heart pounded as the gavel fell. They were no longer co-owners, no longer heirs, now tenants. Under my authority, I looked at Ricky, whose shoulders slumped like a deflated balloon. Ella stared at her shaking hands. I felt the collective exhale of everyone in that courtroom, as justice had not only been served, but cemented with legal finality. After court, I walked outside into the sunlight. Press and cameras jostled for position. I adjusted my coat, inhaled deeply, and answered a few questions with composure. I don't celebrate ruin, I celebrate truth. This house is my legacy. I'm glad they're tenants now, because no one betrays me and stays for free. That afternoon, while the defendants were escorted away, I met privately with my lawyer to draft the lease. Simple, month to month, means-vested rent, no fine print about mental health or caregiving rights, just firm ownership with rights and responsibilities clearly stated. In that moment, I realized the peace, even more than the punishment, was the balance of power returned. They had wanted to control me. I had wrested control back. And legally. That night, I slept in my own bed again, free from the fear of being locked away. Tomorrow I would move forward, not just as a survivor, but as a woman who refused to be erased by cruelty disguised as family. I chose not to evict Ella and Ricky immediately. Instead, I left them in the basement, a living sentence tailored by the court's ruling. Every day, their presence served as a reminder. Those who try to bury you become your tenants. Within weeks, I transformed our home into Grandma May's sanctuary, a haven for older women who had suffered abuse, neglect, or betrayal. I hired a small staff, a social worker, a cook, a part-time nurse, and refurbished the guest rooms with soft pastel linens, supplies, and wellness brochures. The library became a reading and healing room, stocked with biographies of resilient women, guided journals, and tea. Press turned up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Reporters placed microphones near a brass plaque above the front door, carved with a message that whispered of recovery: "No one steals your dignity, if you're brave enough to reclaim it." I stepped up to the podium, my heart drumming like a soldier ready for battle. "They wanted to put me away," I began, voice steady yet warm. "But instead, I turned this house into a safe place for every woman who has been told she isn't worth protection. For every grandmother who thought silence was her only option. They tried to steal more than my money. They tried to steal my truth. But nothing is stronger than a grandmother who wakes up and decides to live." Cameras clicked. Applause rose. A few tears dampened the eyes of women in the audience, survivors who understood that reclaiming a story is itself a victory. After the ceremony, community volunteers arrived with casseroles, flower arrangements, and handmade get-well cards from local school children. A therapist donated her time. A retired judge volunteered to chair monthly empowerment workshops. The town's mayor declared the day Grandma May Day. I accepted the honor on behalf of every resident who feared silence. Inside, while guests mingled and houses filled, I saw Ella downstairs carrying laundry. Ricky had taken up minor repairs, painting cabinet doors, mowing lawns. They were no longer masters of the house, but servants within its walls. Their presence did not anger me, it amused me. This was their sentence: to serve truth beneath the roof they once meant to seize. Each morning, I woke in my bedroom overlooking the sanctuary's garden. Ferns and lavender brushed my windowsill. A wind chime above the porch stirred in the sun. I put on a cardigan and stepped out to water the rose bushes planted in memory of my late husband, roses I had planted the week after Ricky and Ella fell silent in court. "Morning, Ms. May," called Mrs. Jenkins, a soft-spoken widow in her mid-70s. She extended a seedling she had grown. "For your garden." "Thank you," I said, taking it gently. "It's beautiful and welcome." I spent the morning guiding a small class of women through a gratitude exercise, naming something each day they still cherish. Their voices trembled and then steadied like dawn itself. By afternoon, I would walk downstairs through the renovated hall, past portraits of strong women who had shaped my life: my mother teaching Sunday school, my sister cheering me at graduation, my husband's smiling face beside mine. Ricky would look up from the broken railing he was fixing, offer a stiff nod. Ella would hold a tray of lemonade. Neither dared lock eyes too long. It was their silent restitution. One evening I invited them upstairs. We sat in the kitchen early, the air warm with the smell of stewed apples and baked bread. Without ceremony, I asked Ricky to pass the cinnamon rolls. Ella poured tea. The sound of clinking china felt surprisingly gentle. Ricky cleared his throat. I want to apologize." Ella followed, voice soft. "And I'm sorry too. Not just for the will or the emails, but for who I tried to become." I let them speak. I let them land their words. It was not the moment for peace, but for accountability and recognition that even remorse arrives slowly. I said, "Your actions hurt me deeply, but I respect honesty. You are not erased, no one here is erased. But every action now must match your words." Ricky nodded, solemn. Ella folded her hands, tears welling in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, they took part in community service at the sanctuary, collecting donations, gardening, helping older guests feel at home. They worked quietly, showing that restitution isn't measured in words, but in consistent respect. The house grew busier. Lunches were shared in the bright dining room. Afternoons held sessions with visiting counselors. Evenings ended with board games and soft music. A volunteer barber came monthly to give haircuts to anyone who needed it. Every small kindness layered the house in healing energy. Within 6 months, a network of local advocates invited me to speak at the state senate about elder abuse and exploitation. I stood behind a lectern, dressed within my dignity, and told my personal story, chronicling how exploitation can happen inside walls that should feel like home. My voice stayed steady, strong, and as I spoke, I sensed more than support. I sensed transformation. Because every time someone says, "I know she's not crazy," they shift the tide of acceptance in families everywhere. On the anniversary of my husband's death, the sanctuary put up a memorial bench in his name. Family and friends gathered under an oak tree. I held a small ceremony. Ricky offered a brief apology, public this time. Ella handed me a bouquet of daisies, tied with ribbons in shades of the Texas flag. She said he would have liked these. I nodded, accepting both flower and gesture. The bench read, "In memory of John Thompson, who built this house, and in whose name we rebuilt hope." That evening, as I walked back inside, I passed the basement door. I opened it, flipped the switch, but didn't enter. I was not curious about how they were lingering on their sentence, nor did I feel the need to unlock anything. The door remained closed. Stars flickered in the window. I turned and walked upstairs, thinking, they're still here, but this house is no longer their playground. I am its steward. Every sunrise I water plants. I unwrap letters from guests who say the sanctuary saved their lives. I check in on my dear old neighbors. I knit scarves for winter visitors. Sometimes, I sit alone on the front porch, watching the waves of light move across our lawn. I think back on that final day of the trial, when the gavel fell and we held our breath. Justice did not feel like joy. It felt like space to begin again without fear or calculation. I lived long enough not to be silent, and longer still to know that living is not just surviving, but thriving in sight of betrayal. I lived to win. Not against them, but for the truth I reclaimed and the sanctuary I built with it. Thank you for listening to my story. I know I am not the only one. Too many women have been called crazy just for remembering. Too many mothers have been cast aside the moment they stopped giving. And too many elders have been treated like burdens instead of the very roots that held the family tree together. But here's the truth. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just remembered. And then I acted. So if you've ever felt silenced, ignored, or betrayed, this story was for you. Let it remind you, dignity can be stolen, yes, but it can also be reclaimed. One brave choice at a time. If you want more true stories from quiet women who never forgot what was done to them, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. We don't shout, we remember, and that's louder than anything. Until next time, stay steady, stay kind, and never forget, revenge has no expiration date.